Hey, Rick! This is the first episode of a series I'm doing covering the full timeline of Hollow Knight. Because the game deliberately avoids using concrete units of time, I've split the timeline on world-changing events, resulting in 8 eras. The first part of this video covers the first era. In the second part, I'll be explaining the reasoning behind any controversial claims made in the timeline section. When the series is complete, I'll be making a supercut of just the timeline stuff without all the fluff. But enough preamble. On with the story of Hollow Knight. If you'd asked me what I thought the story was about upon completing my first playthrough, I'm sure I would have rattled off some answer about discovery and identity. However, after all the hours I've spent lore diving into my favorite game, I've come to think of it as a story about light and dark, about jealousy and fear and rage and revenge. But above all else, it is a story about the power of dreams. It seems only fitting, then, to start in the Dream Realm, long after the Nightmare Realm broke away. The visiting minds of dreamers pour into that eternal plane the glowing, warm energy of dreams and memories, which the game calls essence. Burning incandescent among the dim constellations of mortal minds, 2 higher beings dream deeply. The first is Un, surrounded by her signature mossy green essence. She sleeps in her underground lake and dreams of caverns covered in moss, leaf, and vine, and of children with whom she can share their beauty. Such is the power of a higher being that one day those children step out of that dream, exulting in the beauty of their caverns and the power of their god. The second higher power is known as the Radiance, pure golden essence taking the form of a giant moth. She shines so brightly that this light spills from her into the waking world, refracted and focused by the crystals of her mountain home. Her light grows so powerful that it manifests a tribe of moths in her image, and they bask in her radiance and honor her by gaining mastery over her essence, over dreams themselves. It's fitting that their most legendary weapon is the Dream Nail, capable of harvesting essence as divine offering so the Radiance can shine all the brighter, better arming her to push back against her greatest foe, the Void. Not much is known about the ancient people who worship that pure darkness, though the evidence of their existence stretches across the entirety of future Hollow Nest. As the light of the Radiance grew brighter and new tribes encroached upon their territory, the Void worshippers were forced to seek their beloved dark in the depths. Eventually, they were confined to the Abyss, shrieking in futile rage before being snuffed out entirely. So far, we've only seen tribes of insects formed around the worship of a higher being, but not all of Hollow Nest civilizations formed that way. At the far edge of the map, the bees are buzzing busily, a hive mind in pursuit only of the continued safety and happiness of their queen, Vespa. In the fungal wastes, the unified mind of the mushroom clan thrives, happily isolated from the outsiders who they pity for their melancholy of disparity. The warriors of the Mantis village center their lives around duty, honor, and discipline, led by their 4 lords who vigilantly defend their border with Deep Nest, where Hera and her noble consort lead the Spider Tribe, and a small retinue of weavers from Farloom reverently serve their king and his chosen queen. Far above their heads, across a dense wall of thorny vines, lives the White Lady, then known as the Root. Far from the queen she would someday be, the Root spreads her seeds as far as she can in a territory surrounded by Green Path, Deep Nest, and the fungal wastes. Apart from the spiders antagonizing their neighbors, and the White Lady's desire to expand her domain, each tribe has carved out their own region, and are either oblivious to or uncaring of the existence of the others. Until, that is, the final higher being takes the stage.
I'm the king of world peace. World peace. World peace.
Well, that's the end of the timeline portion of the video. This is the part where I show my work and hopefully at least get partial credit. Like I said in the intro, I'm going to be including a section like this at the end of all my lore videos for the foreseeable future, as well as releasing a compilation of evidence for questions raised in the comments from the first 2 videos. Which reminds me, I want to take a second and thank everyone who left a like or a comment on those videos. As any of you who have watched my first video, or just have ADHD, will know, sustaining focus and confidence for long enough to complete these videos doesn't come easily to me, and your support has helped immeasurably. As for the other comments, those of you who dared to disagree with me or ask for ridiculous things like evidence, I appreciate y'all just as much. Any claim or lore theory that can't withstand interrogation is one that doesn't deserve your time, so thank y'all for keeping me honest. Alright, as you can see from this list, we've got a lot to go over, so let's get started. The roots. As you probably noticed earlier, I believe that before the king arrived, the White Lady was located in the western portion of Fog Canyon. Apart from the fact that she had to be somewhere, here are the observations which convinced me. We know that Queen's Gardens was once a part of Green Path, and that she doesn't share the Mosskin dream, so she couldn't have been living in any part of what would become the garden. These rooms are clearly environmentally coded as part of the gardens, despite the map marking them as part of Fog Canyon. You could chalk this up to a mistake from Team Cherry, but this would be a pretty large oversight for a design team who otherwise have paid attention to the most minute details. After crossing a barricade of infected thorny roots, as the screen transitions from the pink of Fog Canyon to the deep green of the gardens, we can see a background of dense roots. This background can be found in both the Queen's Garden and the White Palace, both places where the Queen has lived. I was ready to discount this evidence since that background can also be found in a couple of Green Path rooms just above the gardens. However, each of these rooms are inundated by roots bearing infected thorns. Since we know the Queen bound herself in exile to avoid further spreading her fauna, I think it's reasonable to chalk these areas up to roots which have spread after being infected. Lastly, the Mr. Mushroom Riddle tablet refers to his Fog Canyon location as Roots Domain, not the Queen's domain, but the Roots. The Radiance's home. Sitting atop Crystal Peak, the crown of Hollownest is a giant shrine to the Radiance, complete with glyphs in a style seen nowhere else in the game. In fact, the Wanderer's Journal tells us they were written by the Moths. But even if you're leery of considering the Wanderer's Journal a canon source, given what we know about the King's attitude towards the Radiance, logic dictates that these structures would only remain were he not aware of them. The Crystal Peak Whispering Root says, "Light refracted, energy contained," which indicates that the energy in the crystals comes from some of the refracted light being trapped. We get further clues as to the nature of this light from Myla, who relentlessly digs towards the faint, elusive voice she hears deep in the heart of the crystals, even after succumbing to the infection. Let's quickly break this down. Before she's infected, we can see that the light she digs towards is gold and yellow, which we've previously associated with the Radiance. We know she wasn't infected in her sleep because she tells us she's been working without sleeping. As she gets closer to the light she seeks, she remembers the second verse of a favorite song with lyrics that sound suspiciously like an ode to the Radiance's revenge. Oh, bury the knight with a broken nail, bury the lady lovely and pale, bury the priest in his tattered gown, then bury the beggar with his shining crown. Right after she's infected, she sings one last time. What meaning in darkness, yet here I remain. I'll wait here forever till light blooms again. Till light blooms again, huh? Sounds an awful lot like the infected miners are waiting on the return of the Radiance. Myla's post-infection Dreamnail dialogue indicates that she's clearly compelled to keep digging, as well as demonstrating the usual reaction the infected have to the presence of the night. These facts lead me to believe that the light inside the crystals is stored energy from the Radiance. This light must have been introduced before she was exiled to the Dream Realm, so the natural conclusion is that what we call Crystal Peak was once her home. Well, there's one more possible conclusion, but let's put a pin in that for a couple of minutes. The Dreamnail's purpose. Earlier I said the Dreamnail was used to offer essence up to the Radiance, thereby increasing her power. This may on the surface seem like a stretch, but consider the following. The Dream Wielder charm description tells us that the wielder of the Dreamnail collected essence. We can directly observe that this collected essence can then be harvested from the blade, as the seer tells us we must bring her essence to sharpen it. Lastly, everything we know about the Radiance suggests that she demands single-minded worship from her followers. It seems unlikely that she would allow her tribe to harvest essence for any reason other than her own benefit. The Retreat of the Void Worshippers. Not a ton to say on this one as it involves the most speculation. The facts we have to work with are: arcane eggs and soul totems are remnants of their civilization, and the totems can be found in every region of the map except the Hive, Fog Canyon, Mantis Village, the Abyss, and City of Tears. Confusing the matter a bit is the fact that there are quite a few totems in the Soul Sanctum, clearly having been brought there from elsewhere for the purposes of their soul research. The Radiance opposed the darkness, and while the king bragged about taking her place, if he had had a hand in pushing back the Void Worshippers, we'd know about it. Dude was never shy about singing his own praises. The Dreamnail dialogue in the Abyss Shriek Cavern implies strongly that the Voiders were forced into the Abyss by something, so it seems unlikely that they faded from some natural process. Lastly, it doesn't take a huge leap of logic to think that as the moths brought the Radiance more and more essence harvested by the Dreamnail, her light would have grown brighter and brighter. Putting all this together, I came to the conclusion that the growing light of the Radiance would have forced the Void Worshippers deeper and deeper underground to seek their beloved darkness. As I said though, there's quite a bit of speculation here, so if someone has a more compelling reason for their disappearance, I am all ears. Well, that wraps up the explanations for this video, but before I let y'all go, I've got some open questions I'd love to pose to the community. First, I think I've finally parsed the second verse of the old mining song Myla sings and would love to hear y'all's thoughts. Bury the night with her broken nail. This line is referring to Zamir, the Grey Mourner, whose broken nail we can see resting on the wall behind her. Zamir was punished, metaphorically buried, by the death of her love, known to us only as the traitor's child. It may sound like a bit of a stretch to attribute this death to the Radiance, but the burial location of her love tells us that she was killed after the traitor and his tribe willingly became infected and invaded the gardens. Bury the lady, lovely and pale. Clearly, this is about the Pale Lady, buried, diminished, and exiled due to the failure of the vessel plant. Bury the priest in his tattered gown. This line was the hardest to decipher, but I believe this refers to the Soul Master. The key was in the name of the Soul Sanctum. A sanctum is defined as a sacred place, especially a shrine within a temple or church. It helps that this boss bug's clothing has certainly seen better days. Then bury the beggar with his shining crown. How perfectly does this line describe the Pale King from the Radiance's perspective? But that's just my interpretation. I'm curious to hear y'all's thoughts. Speaking of y'all's thoughts, one commenter asserted that Monomon didn't just listen to the vessel plan, she helped craft it, and that was why it was written on the lore tablet in the teacher's archives. Well, I disagree that the only reason she would have written down the plan was if she had a hand in crafting it. The archive was meant to contain the collected wisdom of all of Hollownest, which must include information from sources other than the teacher herself. However, it also stands to reason that the chief researcher of Hollownest would have been involved in the quest to solve the infection, so I'm going to leave this one open and see what y'all think. If there's enough agreement that it makes more sense for Monomon to have been involved in the planning, then when I make my timeline supercut, I'll change that section and I'll give the credit to the commenter who first brought it up. Lastly, let's unpin the possible second conclusion about the Radiance's home. While I'm pretty confident in my Crystal Peak theory, it's hard to ignore the possibility that the Radiance's original location in the physical realm was actually the crown of Hollownest itself. Consider the following. After we acquire the Void Heart, Bardoon tells us that we might now be strong enough to fight nature itself. The most obvious interpretation of this is that we might be strong enough to make Hollownest truly eternal, but given what a ruin the kingdom is, I doubt that that's the intended meaning. I think Bardoon is referring to the Radiance as nature, especially given that the Void Heart unlocks the Radiance fight. The Moss Prophet also refers to the Radiance as the light of life, and says that trying to stifle that light is suppressing nature. A vast amount of bugs, infected or not, refer to the Radiance as simply the light. Even the flavor text for the Pantheon of Hallownest refers to her as the Kingdom's Forgotten Light. The first time we visit a dreamer, the background of the dream realm is inky black. But each subsequent seal we break changes the background, which begins to resemble the sky before a sunrise. Finally, when we face the Radiance, she appears as a rising sun before revealing her moth form. This theme is echoed in her Dreamnail line, "Dawn will break." The White Palace lore tablet which discusses the Radiance bears an illustration of the top half of what looks to be the sun. This appears to be the same illustration which we can see in full at the far right side of Hallownest's crown. Lastly, it's a bit weird that we don't see any glyphs paying tribute to her within the confines of Crystal Peak itself. So then, I'll ask y'all what I've been asking myself on and off for months now. Is it possible that before the Pale King's arrival, her light beamed across the surface and into the heart of Crystal Peak from atop Hallownest's crown? If so, is it possible that the Radiance is actually Hallownest's sun? Let me know what y'all think in the comments below. And that's it. Thanks for watching. I actually scripted and recorded the explanations for my last two videos with the initial intent of including them here. However, that would have added 17 minutes to essentially a 3-minute timeline video. So I'm either going to release those as a separate video or re-upload those first two videos with those sections added on at the end. Let me know in the comments what y'all think, and I will try to get those out to you as quickly as possible.